I served pizza at the alien banquet. Now their entire fleet wants a slice. The wrong guy for the right job, Lieutenant. Casey Vega stared at the transfer orders with the same expression he'd worn when his drill sergeant had announced surprise inspections. Pure, unadulterated disbelief. 3 hours ago, he'd been happily managing supply crates on Luna Station, organizing protein bars by expiration date and arguing with requisition forms. Now he was aboard the UES Harmony, humanity's first diplomatic vessel, hurtling toward a meeting with the Zelthari Empire. "There's been a mistake," Casey told Commander Jessica Hartwell, waving the digital pad like a surrender flag. "I'm logistics. I count things. I make sure people have toilet paper. I don't do whatever this is." Hartwell, a woman who looked like she'd been carved from granite and pressed into a perfectly crisp uniform, didn't even look up from her own pad. "The mistake was made 3 weeks ago when someone in personnel mixed up your file with Lieutenant Carson Vega from the Diplomatic Corps. Carson is currently on Titan, probably wondering why he's been assigned to inventory duty. So fix it. We're 12 hours from first contact with the most powerful alien empire in known space, Vega. We're not turning around because you can't read a job description." Casey slumped into the uncomfortable chair across from her desk. Through the viewport, he could see the Zelthari fleet, dozens of sleek crystalline vessels arranged in perfect geometric formation. They looked like someone had taken a cathedral and taught it to fly. "What exactly am I supposed to do?" he asked. "Simple. During the welcome banquet tonight, you'll manage the human refreshment station. Keep our people fed and hydrated while the real diplomats handle the talking." Hartwell's expression softened slightly. "Look, Vega, I've read your file. You're resourceful, adaptable, and according to your previous CO, you can make a decent meal out of literally anything." "That's exactly what we need." Casey perked up. "Actually, I did bring some supplies." "Good. Whatever it is, make it work. The Zelthari are intense. Their entire culture revolves around order, efficiency, and emotional suppression. Their food is probably about as exciting as their architecture suggests." 2 hours later, Casey stood in the Harmony's small galley surveying his options. The diplomatic team had packed nutritional supplements, energy bars, and something called cultural exchange crackers that looked like cardboard and probably tasted worse. But Casey had made his own preparations for the long journey. Specifically, enough frozen pizza dough, sauce, and toppings to feed a small army. "When in doubt, go with what you know," he muttered, firing up the industrial ovens. The banquet hall aboard the Zelthari flagship was exactly what Casey had expected. A sterile, chrome-plated chamber filled with beings who looked like they'd been individually sculpted by someone with a severe appreciation for symmetry. The Zelthari were tall, elegant, and moved with the precise coordination of a dance troupe. Their leader, High Commander Thaisara Velnet, spoke in measured tones about mutual prosperity and structured cooperation. Casey set up his station in the corner, arranging neat rows of pizza slices on warming trays. The human delegation, led by Ambassador Patricia Morgan, sat rigidly at the main table picking at bowls of what appeared to be gray nutritional paste. "This is their cuisine?" Casey whispered to Dr. Marcus Webb, the team's xenobiologist. "Efficient caloric delivery system," Webb replied without enthusiasm. "No flavor, no texture variation, no unnecessary sensory stimulation. They consider our food habits primitive." Casey watched as Ambassador Morgan struggled through her third spoonful of alien gruel, her diplomat's smile never wavering. Around the hall, Zelthari officials sat in perfect posture, consuming their meals with mechanical precision. That's when he noticed the young Zelthari near the wall, probably junior staff based on the simpler design of their ceremonial robes. Unlike the others, this one kept glancing toward Casey's table, specifically at the aromatic pizza slices. Casey caught the alien's eye and smiled, gesturing toward the food. The Zelthari looked around nervously, then slowly approached. "Is this human sustenance?" the alien asked in perfectly accented English. "Pizza," Casey said simply. "Want to try a slice?" The alien, who couldn't have been much older than Casey, in human years, reached out with one elongated finger and broke off a small piece. The moment it touched their tongue, their large silver eyes went wide, and that's when everything changed. The sacred flatbread incident, the young Zelthari, who introduced himself as junior analyst Kethmore Vextai, stood frozen for exactly 4.7 seconds after tasting the pizza. Casey knew this because he'd started counting when the alien's pupils dilated to twice their normal size. "By the 7 spirals," Kethmore whispered. "What manner of sorcery is this?" "Pepperoni and 3 cheese blend," Casey replied. "Though I guess the sorcery part depends on whether you count the 30-minute delivery guarantee." Kethmore took another bite, this time larger. His normally perfect posture began to relax, and Casey swore he heard something that might have been a satisfied sigh. In the rigidly formal banquet hall, it sounded like a sonic boom. Several other Zelthari turned to look. Their expressions, previously masks of professional indifference, shifted to something Casey had never seen in the briefing materials. Curiosity. "Kethmore," hissed a nearby official, Senior Coordinator Velthon Norshe. "You are displaying irregular behavior patterns." "Senior Coordinator," Kethmore said, still chewing, "I believe you should experience this miracle of engineering." Velthon approached with the cautious steps of someone defusing a bomb. She examined the pizza slice as if it might explode, then took the smallest possible bite. Her reaction was immediate and catastrophic to everything. The briefings had told Casey about Zelthari emotional control. She moaned. Actually moaned. Within minutes, a line had formed at Casey's table. High-ranking officials, junior staff, even some of the security detail, all drawn by the sight of their colleagues experiencing something unprecedented in Zelthari culture. Visible enjoyment. "What is happening here?" The voice cut through the growing chatter like a crystal blade. High Commander Thisara Velneth stood behind the crowd, her 7-foot frame radiating authority. The assembled Zelthari immediately snapped back to attention, pizza sauce still visible on several faces. Casey found himself face to face with the most powerful being in known space, holding a pizza slice like a peace offering. "Would you like to try some, Commander?" The hall fell silent. Ambassador Morgan looked like she was about to have a diplomatic heart attack. Dr. Webb was frantically taking notes. Even the normally unflappable Commander Hartwell had gone pale. Thisara studied Casey with eyes like polished silver. "You offer me sustenance?" "I offer you pizza," Casey said. "It's good pizza, too. Made the dough myself." The High Commander accepted the slice with ceremonial gravity, as if she were being handed a sacred artifact. She took a measured bite, chewed thoughtfully, and swallowed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, incredibly, Thisara smiled. Not the polite, diplomatic expression Casey had seen in the briefing videos, but a genuine, surprised, delighted smile that transformed her entire face. She took another bite, larger this time, and made a sound that was definitely not regulation Zelthari behavior. "This is..." She paused, searching for words. "This is inefficient, messy, completely impractical." Another bite. "I find it acceptable." The dam broke. Within minutes, the formal banquet had devolved into something Casey recognized from his college days. A pizza party. Zelthari officials were laughing, actually laughing, as they discovered the joy of stretchy cheese and the strategic challenge of preventing toppings from sliding off their slices. Commander Hartwell appeared at Casey's elbow. "Vega, what have you done?" "I think," Casey said, watching Thisara demonstrate proper pizza folding technique to a fascinated crowd of subordinates, "I just accidentally solved interstellar diplomacy." Ambassador Morgan rushed over, her carefully planned talking points forgotten. This is unprecedented. They're displaying emotions, complex social behaviors. I've never seen anything like it in the cultural studies." "The power of good food," Casey shrugged. "Works on humans. Apparently works on 7-foot space emperors, too." High Commander Thisara approached their group, still holding her third slice. "Human, Casey," she said formally. "I must inquire about this pizza." Is this how all humans consume sustenance? When we're lucky, Casey replied, though most of us can't make it from scratch. From scratch? Thisura's eyes lit up with interest. You created this yourself? This is not mass-produced nutritional supplementation? Nope. Mixed the dough, rolled it out, made the sauce from tomatoes, well, reconstituted tomato powder, but still, it's all about the technique. The High Commander was quiet for a long moment, then turned to address the hall. Attention. This evening's proceedings have been illuminating. We will reconvene tomorrow to discuss the cultural exchange possibilities of this pizza phenomenon. As ye, the formal banquet dissolved into animated conversations about crust thickness and topping combinations. Casey realized that his career in logistics might have just taken a very unexpected turn. The great pizza rush Casey woke up to the sound of alarms and the sight of Commander Hartwell's face hovering inches from his own, which was never a good sign. Vega, we have a situation, she said grimly. Look out the viewport. Casey stumbled to the small window in his quarters and felt his stomach drop. The neat, geometric formation of the Zelthari fleet had been replaced by what could only be described as a traffic jam. Dozens of ships clustered around the Harmony like metal fish around a feeding station, their hulls gleaming in the system's twin suns. How many? Casey asked. 47 vessels and counting. They started arriving 3 hours ago. Every time we try to ask what they want, they just keep requesting audience with the keeper of sacred flatbread. Hartwell's expression suggested she'd rather be dealing with an actual invasion. Congratulations, Vega. You're famous. The situation became clearer during the emergency briefing. Dr. Webb, looking like he hadn't slept, pulled up holographic displays showing communication intercepts from across the Zelthari network. The word spread faster than we anticipated, he explained. What started as casual conversation about last night's banquet has become, well, a phenomenon. They're calling it the Great Awakening of Flavor. Some of the outer colonies are treating it as a religious experience. Ambassador, Morgan rubbed her temples. We're receiving formal requests from 17 different Zelthari worlds. They want cultural exchange programs, cooking demonstrations, and something called Pilgrimage of the Sacred Dough. They want pizza, Casey translated. They want you to teach them pizza, Morgan corrected. Specifically, by name, the High Commander has submitted an official proposal to establish what she's calling the intergalactic culinary exchange, with you as director. Casey blinked. I'm sorry, director of what now? Before anyone could answer, the ship's communication system crackled. To life. UES Harmony, this is battlecruiser Keth Norris requesting permission to dock. We have traveled 7 parsecs to witness the miracle of melted cheese. Commander Hartwell activated the comm. Keth Norris, you're the 15th ship to make that request today. We don't have docking space for... Please, the alien voice interrupted, and Casey was surprised to hear desperation in the formal tones. My crew has subsisted on regulation nutritional paste for 6 months. We have heard tales of the human Casey's gift of joy. We offer our services in exchange for instruction in the sacred arts. Casey looked around the room at the faces of Earth's finest diplomatic minds all staring at him expectantly. Well, he said finally, I guess I'm going to need a bigger kitchen. The next few hours were a blur of hasty negotiations and improvised logistics. The Zelthari, with typical efficiency, began converting one of their largest vessels into what Casey could only describe as a floating culinary academy. Meanwhile, Casey found himself in the unprecedented position of writing the galaxy's first interspecies cooking curriculum. Lesson 1, he dictated to Dr. Webb, who was frantically taking notes. Dough preparation and the importance of proper kneading technique. They want to know about the spiritual significance of the kneading process, Webb said, looking up from his tablet. The what now? Apparently, several Zelthari philosophers have theorized that the repetitive motion induces a meditative state that allows the cook to commune with the essence of the grain. They're calling it sacred dough communion. Casey stared at him. It's just kneading, Doc. You do it so the gluten develops properly and the crust doesn't turn out like cardboard. I think you might want to workshop that explanation, Webb suggested diplomatically. The real challenge came when Casey met his first official student, General Vorthak Kelmesh, a decorated military commander who had apparently traveled from the Outer Rim, specifically to learn what he called the ancient human art of circular sustenance creation. The general stood at rigid attention in the makeshift kitchen aboard the converted Zeltari vessel, wearing what appeared to be ceremonial cooking robes and an expression of absolute determination. "Human Casey," he announced formally. "I have studied 17 tactical manuals and meditated for 12 hours in preparation for this moment. I am ready to earn the right to knead the sacred dough." Casey looked at this 7-foot alien warrior, standing at attention like he was about to receive the most important military briefing of his career, and realized that his life had officially entered territory that no amount of logistics training had prepared him for. "Okay, General," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "Let's start with flour." The lesson did not go as planned. It turns out that beings accustomed to perfectly controlled regulation everything have difficulty with concepts like a pinch of salt and until it feels right. General Vorthak approached pizza making with the same precision he'd probably used to plan military campaigns, measuring ingredients to the microgram and timing each step with chronometer accuracy. The result was technically pizza, edible pizza. Completely flavorless, perfectly circular, regulation thickness pizza. "I have failed," the general declared solemnly, staring at his creation. "The sacred dough does not sing with joy." Casey took a bite of the general's pizza and considered his words carefully. Around them, other Zeltari students watched with intense interest, waiting to see how their instructor would handle this first failure. "General," Casey said finally, "I think your problem isn't technical skill. It's that you're trying to make perfect pizza instead of good pizza." The general's eyes widened slightly. "There is a difference?" "Let me show you," Casey said, and began making another batch of dough, this time with deliberately imperfect measurements, casual timing, and what his grandmother would have called cooking by feel. When the general tasted Casey's demonstration pizza, his expression underwent the same transformation Casey had witnessed the night before. But this time, Casey was ready for what came next. "I understand now," the general said reverently. "This is not about precision. This is about joy." And with that single word, Casey realized he was about to become the most unlikely ambassador in human history, the Joy Revolution. 3 weeks later, Casey stood in the observation deck of what was formerly the Zeltari command vessel Rigid Perfection, and watched as his students practiced their pizza-making skills in the converted hangar bay below. The sight would have given the original Zeltari High Command collective heart attacks. Dozens of uniformed officers laughing as they tossed dough in the air, sauce-stained robes, and the unmistakable sound of pure enjoyment echoing through corridors that had previously known only military precision. "The transformation is remarkable," said Subcommander Listhara Monvel, Casey's unofficial assistant and the closest thing the Zeltari had to a translator of human emotions. She was tall even by Zeltari standards, with intricate silver markings along her temples that Casey had learned indicated high intelligence ranking. "My people are changing." Casey watched General Vorthak attempt to show a junior officer the proper cheese-melting technique while simultaneously trying not to laugh at his students' enthusiasm. "Is that a problem?" "I do not know," Listhara admitted. "For 700 years our civilization has prized order above all else. Emotions were considered inefficient, disruptive, yet now—" She gestured toward the hangar bay where someone had started an impromptu cheese-stretching contest. "Now they laugh, they experiment, they create things that serve no purpose, except joy. And they are happier than I have ever seen them." Listhara's expression was complex, mixing wonder with something that might have been concern. "The High Command grows uneasy." Casey had been expecting this. It was hard to maintain an empire built on rigid control when your citizens were discovering the simple pleasure of making something with their own hands. "What kind of uneasy?" "There are reports from across the empire. Productivity in some sectors has decreased as workers experiment with creative modifications to their duties. Several colonies have requested permission to establish what they call joy gardens, spaces dedicated purely to activities that serve no functional purpose. Sounds terrible, Casey said dryly. You do not understand. Lithara turned to face him directly. High Commander Thisara has received communications from the Inner Council. They are displeased with recent developments. There is talk of classifying your pizza instruction as a form of cultural contamination. Casey felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate control. What does that mean? It means, said a new voice, that some very important people want to have a conversation with you. Casey turned to see Thisara herself approaching, flanked by two figures he didn't recognize. Zelthari in formal robes that seemed somehow more elaborate than even the High Commander's ceremonial gear. Casey of Earth, Thisara said formally. I present Council Prime Zerthal Vexthul and Council Prime Yethara Delmon, representatives of the Inner Council. The two newcomers studied Casey with expressions that could have etched glass. Council Prime Zerthal stepped forward first. Human, he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that suggested he wasn't used to being questioned. You have caused considerable disruption to our social order. By teaching people to make pizza, Casey asked. By teaching people to prioritize personal satisfaction over collective efficiency, corrected Council Prime Yethara. Her tone suggested she'd rather be discussing the weather, preferably from a safe distance. Your influence has spread to 47 worlds. Productivity is down. Citizens are engaging in unauthorized creative activities. Some have even begun to question established protocols. Casey glanced at Thisara, trying to read her expression. The High Commander's face remained carefully neutral, but he caught something in her eyes. A warning, maybe, or perhaps encouragement. With respect, Casey said carefully, maybe the problem isn't that people are less productive. Maybe it's that they were never supposed to be just productive in the first place. The silence that followed was profound enough to have its own gravitational pull. You suggest, Council Prime Zerth said slowly, that efficiency is not the highest good? I suggest that happiness might be worth something too. Happiness, repeated Council Prime Yethara, pronouncing the word like it was a foreign concept. Which, Casey realized, it probably was. An emotional state with no functional benefit. Actually, interrupted Dr. Webb's voice over the comm system. If I may interject, our preliminary studies show that the Zelthari subjects who have participated in the culinary program demonstrate improved problem-solving abilities, enhanced creativity, and better social cooperation. Casey smiled. Leave it to the scientist to find a way to quantify joy. Furthermore, Webb continued, the psychological benefits of creative expression have been well documented in human studies. There's significant evidence that happiness actually increases long-term productivity, not decreases it. The two council primes exchanged glances. Lithara stepped forward. If I may, she said carefully, I have observed similar effects in my own personnel. Those who have participated in human Casey's instruction show increased initiative, better team cooperation, and what can only be described as enhanced morale. Morale, Zerthal repeated. The quality of being motivated, confident, and prepared to work effectively, Lithara defined. Casey watched as the two most powerful Zelthari in the known galaxy wrestled with concepts that most humans took for granted. It was like watching someone try to solve an equation when they'd never heard of addition. Perhaps, Thisara said, quietly, efficiency and happiness are not mutually exclusive. Council Prime Yethara turned to stare at her. High Commander, surely you cannot be suggesting— I am suggesting, Thisara interrupted, that we conduct a proper evaluation. Give human Casey full authorization to expand his program, monitor the results, apply proper scientific methodology to determine whether this joy has measurable benefits. And if it does not? Zerthal asked. Thisara's smile was subtle, but unmistakable. Then we will have learned something valuable about the limitations of emotion. But if it does, she let the implication hang in the air like the aroma of fresh pizza. Casey realized he was witnessing the birth of a revolution. Not one fought with weapons or political maneuvering, but with the simple radical idea that maybe, just maybe, life was supposed to be enjoyed. "All right," he said, looking around at the assembled representatives of galactic power. "But I'm going to need a lot more flour." Part 5. The Department of Impossible Things. 6 months later, Casey stood in his new office aboard the specially constructed vessel UES Mozzarella, named by popular vote among the crew, and marveled at how completely his life had changed. Through the massive viewport, he could see the newly established culinary exchange station, a joint human-Zelthari facility that looked like someone had crossed a space station with a 5-star restaurant and a university campus. "The morning. Briefing, Director," announced his assistant, bringing Casey back to the present. Lieutenant Zoe Martinez had volunteered for the position after what she called the most interesting job posting in Starfleet history. She handed him a digital pad filled with the day's impossible requests. "Let's see," Casey said, scrolling through the list. "The Andorian delegation wants to know if we can adapt pizza for their triple metabolism biology. The Rigelian Trade Consortium is offering exclusive mining rights in exchange for exclusive pizza recipes. And," he paused, "the Vulcan High Council wants to discuss the logical applications of controlled joy. Also," Martinez added with barely contained amusement, "General Vorthak's Advanced Battle Pizza Academy graduated its first class yesterday. They're requesting permission to establish field kitchens on active duty vessels." Casey laughed. The general had taken to his culinary training with the same intensity he'd once applied to military strategy, eventually developing what he called tactical nutrition, the art of maintaining morale through superior field cooking. His students were now among the most requested personnel in the Zelthari fleet. "How are our numbers looking?" "The program now operates on 143 worlds," Martinez reported. "We have over 50,000 certified instructors, and the waiting list for new facilities has reached 6 months. The Zelthari Council formally recognized happiness as a strategic resource last week." "And Earth?" "Still trying to figure out what to do with you. Admiral Richardson sends his congratulations and says the diplomatic corps is reevaluating their entire approach to first contact protocols." A soft chime indicated an incoming priority communication. The holographic display activated to show High Commander Thisara, but Casey almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the rigid posture and formal expression. In their place was someone who looked relaxed, happy even. "Casey," she said warmly, "I trust you are well?" "Can't complain. How's the revolution going?" Thisara's smile was genuine. "Better than projected. The Inner Council has just approved the establishment of joy districts on all major worlds. Designated areas where citizens can engage in purely creative activities. Productivity has actually increased by 12% system-wide." "Turns out happy people work better," Casey said. "Who knew?" "Indeed. Which brings me to today's communication. The Council has a proposal for you." Casey braced himself. Proposals from galactic governments usually involved either parades or execution, and he wasn't sure which one he'd prefer. "We would like to offer you permanent citizenship in the Zelthari Empire, along with the newly created position of Minister of Cultural Enhancement." Casey blinked. That's a real job title?" "As of yesterday, you would oversee joy initiatives across our entire territory, establish new programs for creative expression, and serve as official liaison between our species." Thisara paused. "The position comes with your own fleet, unlimited resources, and a staff of approximately 10,000. 10,000 people to help make pizza? 10,000 people to help spread happiness," Thisara corrected. "Pizza is merely the delivery method." Casey looked around his office, at the awards from grateful colonies, the pictures from graduation ceremonies on distant worlds, the stack of thank you letters from Zelthari children who had tasted ice cream for the first time. He thought about Lieutenant Casey Vega, who had just wanted to manage supply crates and avoid bureaucratic errors. There's just one condition, he said finally. Thaisara raised an eyebrow. Name it. I want Fridays off. And I mean completely off. No emergency pizza consultations, no urgent joy crises, no calls about critical cheese shortages. Agreed. And I want Lieutenant Martinez promoted to Deputy Director, with full authority to approve new programs. Also agreed. Casey grinned. Then I guess you've got yourself a Minister of Cultural Enhancement. As the communication ended, Martinez looked at him with barely concealed excitement. So what's our first official act as the Department of Impossible Things? Casey thought about it for a moment, then walked to the viewport and looked out at the culinary exchange station. Humans and Zelthari worked side by side in the visible kitchens, laughing as they taught each other their respective recipes. Beyond them, ships from a dozen different species waited for their chance to discover what the growing galactic community was calling the human gift of joy. I think, Casey said slowly, we need to figure out how to make tacos in zero gravity. The Centaurian delegation has been asking about folded food cylinders, and I have a feeling we're about to start the next galactic food revolution. Martinez grinned and made a note on her pad. One taco program coming up. Should I schedule a meeting with the physics department? Definitely. And Martinez? Yes, Director? Make sure we order extra napkins. Something tells me this is going to get messy. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched endlessly in all directions, full of civilizations yet to discover the simple revolutionary act of sharing a meal with friends. Casey Vega, former logistics officer and current Minister of Cultural Enhancement, smiled as he began planning humanity's most important export. The radical idea that life was meant to be enjoyed. After all, the galaxy was a big place, and everyone deserved good pizza.